I'm Alex Hunter, and 3 nights ago my phone lit up at 2:17 a.m. with a call from my father, Richard Hunter. The same man who disowned me 4 years ago swept me off any inheritance list with a cold-clipped decree. You chose that filthy pet care life. You're on your own. Now, with barely a whisper of remorse, he was begging me for $120,000 to bail out the very empire he once promised to hand me. That moment, watching his name flash on my lock screen, feeling the weight of that earlier betrayal pressing down like a lead blanket, felt like the culmination of every unfair advantage he ever hoarded for my younger brother Mason. I hovered my thumb over declined coffee still steaming in my other hand, the city lights of Brooklyn blinking through my loft window as if mocking my hesitation. And in that split second as silence stretched between us, I realized this wasn't just a phone call. It was the opening gambit in a new round of a battle I never asked to fight. I grew up convinced that hard work and loyalty paid off. I moved out of my parents' brownstone in Manhattan at 18 with nothing more than a duffel bag, a couple $100 scraped together from summer gigs, and the conviction that my love for animals, my filthy animals, Dad called them, would sustain me. I spent late nights studying veterinary care videos on YouTube, then early mornings waiting tables or delivering groceries, all so I could save enough to launch my first pop-up pet care booth in Williamsburg. Against the odds, it caught fire. My tutorials on grooming and behavioral tricks went viral, and I parlayed that into Opening Paws and Prosecco, a cozy spa cafe boutique hybrid for pets and their people. I poured my soul and every penny into creating a place that felt like home for anyone who walked through its door, a place where Fido could sip a puppy latte while I penned another script for my channel. By the time I was 29, I had 3 locations across Brooklyn and a thriving online community. Yet neither that success nor the public's empathy could mend the fissure in my family. It was Easter Sunday 4 years ago when my world spun off its axis. I'd driven across the Brooklyn Bridge in a rental car. My own Corolla was in the shop, past pastel-painted townhouses adorned with lilies and braided wreaths headed for the Hunter family gathering at their riverside loft. Mom had texted earlier, "We're all so proud of you, Alex." Or so I thought. Slowing to a stop at the doorstep, I caught my reflection in the tarnished brass knocker, dark circles under my eyes, a smudge of flour on my apron sneakers that had seen better days. I hesitated just long enough to wonder if it was worth it, if my presence would be appreciated, or just another reminder of how different my life had become. Then I squared my shoulders, rang the bell, and stepped inside. The place had been transformed into a pastel battleground, tables overflowing with deviled eggs, glazed hams, and carrot cakes so pristine they looked carved. My parents, always the gracious hosts, spoke in low, measured tones to my older brother Mason, who'd decided on finance and real estate like a dutiful heir in training. Mason was in a tailored Navy suit, laughing easily with his fiancée about tax strategies and offshore accounts. No one laughed like that for my pet grooming lectures. No one lifted a glass of bubbly to toast Alex's amazing YouTube empire. Instead, after 20 minutes of polite small talk, every syllable coated in half smiles, I felt the silence growing heavy around me. I tapped my foot next to a mahogany credenza heart, squeezing when I saw a stack of glossy brochures for the family's real estate firm labeled Hunter & Co., with Mason's name front and center on the title page. Then Dad stood, that booming voice filling the room like a judge's gavel. "We have a special announcement," he said, raising his glass. I forced a toast heart thrumming in my throat. "Today," he continued, "we've decided that all our assets company shares properties, even the trust fund, will pass to Mason." Polite applause erupted as choreographed as a Broadway number. I stared at the rim of my wine glass, watching my reflection warp in the red liquid. Mom beamed at Mason as though he were a freshly minted prince. Mason bowed politely, chest puffed in triumph. And me, I was the ghost at the table, invisible until required to fetch another tray of hors d'oeuvres or nod at some stock market anecdote I didn't understand. That evening, I cornered Dad in the foyer, voice steady but low. "What about me?" My question sliced through the chatter. The room stilled. Conversations froze mid-laughter. Mom hovered behind him wide-eyed. But Dad, arms folded, rolled his eyes. "Alex, you have a successful business, a team, a brand. Mason has nothing but this." He gestured toward Mason as though pointing at a beggar in tattered coats. "You chose that filthy animal care path. You had your chance. This is his turn." The words hit me like a physical blow. I tasted blood. I swallowed it. I asked for nothing. I said, voice barely above a whisper. I asked only for respect and that you see my work as something more than dirt under my nails. He shrugged, and just like that, I was cut loose. Over the next year, I tried to bridge the gap. I sent flowers on Mother's Day, fixed mom's air conditioner in the height of summer, offered unsolicited market recommendations when the firm's numbers took a dip. I came to help, even invested in $80,000 when a crucial contract fell through money Dad guaranteed I'd recoup. When you and I are gone, you'll still hold a share. But promises held no weight once spoken. When I asked for a signed agreement, he hung up on me. Every plea, every act of goodwill slid off him like rain off a waxed trunk. So when Dad called me for that $120,000 rescue 3 nights ago, I saw the pattern. Family meant value only when convenient. As soon as the storm passed, I'd be erased again. I declined, hung up, and watched the Brooklyn skyline blur through tears I refused to shed. I'm no hero, but I'm no doormat either. And now, with the weight of that betrayal fresh in my mind, I'm gearing up for a reckoning they never saw coming. In the days since I've rebuilt my fortress of solitude inside studios and cozy conference rooms talking strategy with Jenna Lopez, my fiercely loyal COO, on a loop of coffee refills and legal briefings, we've mapped out every way Dad's empire can crumble under the glare of public scrutiny, every algorithm we can trigger on social platforms to expose his hypocrisy. Jenna's whispered motto, "We fight dirty with the truth," has become my battle cry. So here I am, perched at the edge of a new crusade, the skyline glittering behind me like a promise. And as I prepare to step back into that arena where family secrets are weapons, reputation is currency, and love is conditional, I feel an electric thrill. Because this time I have something no billionaire patriarch can ever take the audience on my side in a story that's only just beginning. I still remember the first morning after I hung up on Dad's desperate plea. Sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains of my Brooklyn loft, dancing across the worn oak floors like little spotlights on the chaos I'd left behind. My phone lay face down on the coffee table beside an empty espresso cup, the screen cracked just enough to remind me of every time I refused to answer that call. In that silence, I felt something shift inside me, an ignition of resolve that rose hotter than any anger. I'd spent years auditioning for their approval, rehearsing polite laughter, and polishing my pitches to the family board only to be shoved off the inheritance cliff. Now I was done begging to be seen. It was time I became the spotlight. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, the bitter aroma filling the room and reminding me of late nights spent scripting tutorial videos. My heart thrummed with plans to dismantle every pillar of Dad's empire, expose his favoritism, and use the very tools he had taught me, the power of platform, the sway of public opinion, to turn his world upside down. But first, I had to steel my nerves for the battlefield ahead. I inhaled deeply, savoring the burn of the dark roast, imagining each sip as an armor plating for my will. Then I tapped my phone awake and opened my notes app, fingers hovering over a new file I titled Operation Hunter Fallout. My first move was social. I drafted a post on LinkedIn and Instagram, two platforms Dad never bothered to master, detailing the story of that Easter dinner, the confident toast, the hollow applause, the weight of inheritance passed to Mason. I wrote in plain language, no hyperbole, just the facts that I'd built Paws and Prosecco from nothing, that my devotion to animals and community had netted 3 thriving locations and a global audience, yet my own father deemed it worthless. I signed it, Alex Hunter, founder and CEO, Paws and Prosecco, and hit publish. Almost immediately, the likes and comments poured in messages of sympathy, outrage, disbelief. Small influencers in the pet care niche shared my post with their followers. The notification bell chimed incessantly, a digital roar that echoed louder than any boardroom speech Dad ever gave. That afternoon, Jenna Lopez slid into my office, our makeshift war room, arms crossed, a half smile playing on her lips. "Well, shit," she said, scanning my screen. "You've officially poked the bear." I smiled back, adrenaline crackling. About time someone poked him. Jenna grabbed a whiteboard marker and began mapping out the ripple effects every investor who'd ever reached out to Mason, every property development Dad had crowed about in press releases, every community project he used to polish his public image. "We hit them where it hurts," Jenna said, writing Transparify at the top, our chosen name for the Truth campaign. "No more half-truths, no more hush money. We expose it all." The word felt heavy and liberating on the board, like the title of a documentary nobody would forget. Still, I couldn't shake a nagging doubt. What if Dad responded with legal threats? What if he had Mason's connections ready to execute a defamation suit? The risk was real. My fledgling brand could suffer collateral damage. But as I looked at Jenna's determined face, I realized that real change never came from playing it safe. If I shrank back now, I'd always be the dutiful son, and that role had nearly killed my spirit. So I leaned in, voice barely a whisper, yet ironclad. Let them threaten. With every lawsuit, they give us another platform. Every court filing, public record. We'll weaponize their aggression. Jenna nodded, eyes shining. We'll feed the monster until it devours itself. That evening, I set up a discreet meeting with Marcus King, the investigative reporter from Brooklyn Vibes, who'd once covered a dog-friendly cafe controversy. Over cold brew in a corner booth at a vegan pizza joint, I laid out the timeline, the scholarship I'd earned, the hand-me-down bike I'd fixed up as my first grooming station, the countless nights I'd slept under my desk rather than crash on a friend's couch. I showed Marcus email threads where Dad promised me a formal share of the company when the dust settled, then vanished when I asked for paperwork. I handed him photos of my first pop-up in a damp warehouse parking lot complete with a cardboard sign reading, "Free Pet Spa Demo." He listened, scribbling notes, his frown deepening. When I finished, he looked up and said, "This is bigger than a family feud. This is about a billionaire culture that discards anyone who doesn't toe the line. I'll run a story. We'll shine a light on exactly how the Hunter dynasty polices loyalty." By midnight, the first draft appeared online: how a dog groomer took on Brooklyn's most powerful real estate family. It quickly climbed the trending list shared by local activists, and hashtags like hashtag #FamilyFirstFail and #PawsOfJustice began to sprout. Suddenly, people who'd never cared about pet grooming were calling my showroom to ask if I was that guy. Sales inquiries skyrocketed. My phone, once a hotline for supply orders, buzzed with interview requests from podcasts and local news. The media had turned my family drama into a cause célèbre, a small business founder challenging entrenched privilege. Amid the maelstrom, I felt a pulse of renewed confidence, but also a twinge of sorrow. Each ping of praise reminded me how lonely the journey had been. I thought of Mason, silent and smug on that loft stage as applause drowned me out, and wondered if he'd feel the first sting of accountability when he read that article. I thought of Mom and how she'd once told me, "Your passion is your gift to the world," only to retract that sentiment when Dad whispered his displeasure. I felt the old ache like a locket rusting shut around my heart, then shook it off. Nostalgia was a chain I no longer needed. The next morning, I walked into Paws and Prosecco's flagship store on Bedford Avenue, the bell chiming as I pushed open the door. The space smelled of almond shampoo and fresh pastries. A framed copy of the article sat emblazoned on the community board, annotated with sticky notes and hearts. Customers clapped as I stepped behind the counter. A little boy brought his scruffy terrier over, beaming, "Mr. Hunter, Hunter, thank you for being brave." His words, simple, earnest, pierced me more sharply than any insult ever had. I knelt to his level and ruffled his hair. "We do this for you," I said, "and every pet who deserves love without judgment." His terrier licked my hand in approval, a tiny seal of solidarity. Yet, as I stood back up, I noticed a familiar face through the display window: Richard Hunter himself, flanked by two stern-looking associates. His gaze locked onto me, unreadable. He watched for a moment, the strain of 4 decades of boardroom battles written in the set of his jaw, then turned and disappeared down the street. I felt my chest tighten, adrenaline rushing. He'd come here into my world. The unspoken question hung heavy: was this a reconnaissance mission for another financial ambush, or had he come to face me son to father in the arena I'd built? That night, I found myself restless in bed, mind racing through every possible scenario. I reached out to Jenna. He was at the store today. 2 suits, black SUV, eyes on me for a full minute. "What next?" Jenna responded. "He's testing your defenses. Time to raise the drawbridge." I pictured installing security cameras, drafting subpoenas for those email promises, and preparing a press release to preempt any smear campaign. But more than that, I realized I needed a new symbolic gesture to cut through the noise, something tangible that captured the stakes of this fight. In the glow of my laptop, I sketched an idea: a limited edition enamel pin shaped like a cat's claw wrapped around a broken chain, emblazoned with Paws and Prosecco on one side and Family First crossed out on the other. It would be available exclusively at the store, with proceeds funding legal fees and small grants to local pet rescues overlooked by big donors. The pin would be a badge of honor for anyone who refused to let old loyalties shackle their future. I tapped out a quick message to our designer: "Mock it up. Let's make it our rallying cry." As dawn crept in again, I leaned back in my chair and let the first rays strike my resolute claw sketch. Symbols were powerful; they could distill a battle into a single, unforgettable image. This claw and chain motif felt right, a nod to the grit of the underdog, the tenacity of a small business, and the breaking of ancestral bonds that never truly served me. If Dad wanted a war, I'd give him one he couldn't ignore, and I'd do it on my terms. But deep down, amid my plans and my pins, a quieter question gnawed at me: did I really want to destroy my family's legacy, or simply reclaim my own? The line between justice and vengeance blurred in the half-light. I sipped cold coffee, staring at the city skyline, just as the sirens began their morning song. In that moment, I realized the next chapter would demand a balance between fury and foresight. One misstep could turn public support into a backfire sympathy into sympathy fatigue. And just as I weighed the risk, my phone buzzed with a notification. I couldn't have predicted Mason's name topping the trending news for an anonymous tip about offshore shell companies linked to Hunter & Co. Someone was digging into him. Someone was ready to turn the Hunter empire inside out, and I wasn't sure if the hand guiding that leak was mine, Jenna's, or another force entirely. The line between ally and adversary blurred as the dawn broke over Brooklyn, and I realized this fight was about more than a fractured family. It was a reckoning long overdue, and it was only just begun. I wake to the first hack of dawn slipping through the slatted blinds, and before my brain can register the coffee craving, I remember today is the day Marcus's expose goes live. By 9 a.m., Brooklyn Vibes will publish Hunter and Comping Behind the Family Facade, a deep dive on offshore accounts, shady shell companies, and real estate flips that Mason quietly oversaw while Dad polished his image. Jenna and I have rehearsed every social media post, every press release statement, but nothing can quiet the thunder of nerves roaring in my skull. I swing my legs out of bed, toes grazing the hardwood, and reach for my phone. The headline is already trending. In the shower, I run cold water over my back, letting the shock jolt me awake. It's as though I'm baptizing myself for the next phase of this fight. The steam swirls around me like a battlefield mist, and I imagine Dad standing under a similar spray, hands clenched, forced to reckon not with boardroom applause but with public disgrace. I lather shampoo through my hair, eyes closing against the soapy sting, and whisper under my breath. This is for every discarded underdog. When I step out, dripping and defiant, I fasten a business casual jacket over my paws and Prosecco tea, the uniform of a man who has bridged two worlds, startup scrappiness and polished entrepreneurship. I hustle to the flagship store on Bedford Avenue, Jenna, already there pacing between the grooming stations and cafe tables, as if charting invisible lines of defense. The digital screens above the counter loop teaser clips from the Vibes article, overheard phone calls hinting at clandestine meetings, scanned documents marked confidential, and Mason's photo captioned, "The Untouchable Heir." Customers drift in coffee cups and dog leashes in hand, craning their necks to read the headlines. A flurry of activity ripples through the space. Orders get delayed, staff eye their phones, and I spot a local blogger snapping photos for Instagram stories. This isn't just about my family anymore, it's become a community spectacle. Okay, I say, stepping onto a crate to elevate my height, adopting the confident posture I learned from hosting live demos. Here's how we move. We pin our response to the wall. I gesture to the prototype enamel pin Jenna and our designer sketched last night, that cat claw breaking free from its chain, and we kick off our crowdfight campaign. For every pin sold, $50 go to local animal shelters blacklisted by big donors. We're turning hate into rescue kits. The room crackles with energy as staff members nod, already drafting email blasts and planning a live unboxing on TikTok. The pin is more than merch. It's a symbol of liberation, a talisman for anyone who's ever been written off. My phone buzzes, a calendar reminder pops up, 11 a.m. Call with Brian Carter. Brian's our go-to attorney, the one who first told me that Mason's defamation could be a goldmine in court. I excuse myself, slipping into my office where I dial in. His gravelly voice crackles through. Alex, they're filing a cease and desist this afternoon. Hunter and Comey is claiming you're libeling them with these allegations. My gut twists. This is the kind of risk I knew we'd take, but until the paperwork materializes, it's a punch to the gut. Send it over, I reply, swallowing. We'll countersue for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. He sighs. I'll have the countermotion ready by close of business. You stay on offense. I hang up, heart pounding, but a grim smile tugs at my lips. Let them threaten. Let them overextend. In the courtroom, we'll deploy every shred of evidence. I step out into the street, the hum of subway trains underground, and the chatter of early commuters around me. At the corner coffee cart, I order a double espresso, my armor for a day full of skirmishes. The barista slides it across and says, "Saw your pin campaign, big love, Alex." I grin, dropping a bill in the jar labeled Rescue Fund, feeling that sweet charge when strangers recognize your cause. 2 blocks later, I duck into a nondescript brownstone where Sophia Hunter lives, my aunt and Mason's secret shareholder. Jenna's been in contact with her, and today is our first face-to-face. Sophia's apartment is quiet, minimalist, except for a single photograph on the mantle, Mason and me as kids, sharing a Halloween costume, 2 halves of a tiger suit forced together. Back then, we were equal. Sophia offers herbal tea and sits me down. I never believed in Dad's obsession with legacy, she says, voice low. I invested in you because I saw passion in your eyes, something I never saw in Mason. She slides a manila envelope across the coffee table. I open it email chains between Dad and the offshore trust manager's voice recordings of Dad instructing Mason on how to conceal investor capital, and a photocopy of my own scholarship acceptance letter annotated with Dad's icy note. No more handouts. Rage flickers in my chest, but also relief. This is the smoking gun. I thank her, pressing her hand. You've given me more than you know. She smiles sadly. Just don't destroy every bridge. Not everyone is our enemy. Her warning lingers as I pocket the documents. Back at Pause and Prosecco, I convene a strategy huddle with Jenna and Marcus via video call. We lay out the new intel, a coordinated leak of the envelope's contents to major publications timed with Jenna's crowdfunding launch and the cease and desist deadline. We want to force their hand, Jenna says, so they either back down or double down and expose themselves further. Marcus grins. I can get this in the Daily Brooklyn and maybe even the Post. It'll go national in the next cycle. I feel the familiar surge, the thrill of turning the tables. But I also feel exhaustion. This fight is bigger and darker than I'd imagined. As evening falls, I slip out for a moment alone, heading to the waterfront park where I used to train my rescue doves for YouTube cameos. I sit on a bench, the East River, dark and roiling before me. The skyline glows, each tower a beacon of other people's dreams. I pull out my journal, blank pages until today, and jot down a line: power belongs to those who dare to wield it. I pause, tracing the claw and chain pin I've snapped onto my jacket. Symbols matter, they distill an entire war into a single image. The pin isn't just merchandise, it's a testament that even the smallest grip can break free from the strongest bonds. But as I sit there absorbed in the rippling water and the electric hum of distant traffic, doubt creeps in. Have I crossed a line from justice into vengeance? I recall Sophia's caution that not everyone is our enemy. I think of Mom, heartbroken in our loft, caught between two sons she loves. Is there a path back for her, or has the rift become too wide? The air smells of salt and possibility and of regret. I close my journal, resolve crystallizing. I'll keep fighting, but I'll also protect whatever good remains. A warrior with a cause, yes, but also a family member who still cares. My phone buzzes again, a text from an unknown number. Stop now or face the fallout. R. 3 characters, 6 words, a threat, and a promise, both at once. I stare at the screen, pulse quickening. I could delete it, ignore it, laugh it off. But I know better. This is the true turning point. Either I back down and lose everything I've built, or I stand firm and risk breaking everything in my path. My thumb hovers over the reply field. The world waits, breath-baited. And in that pregnant silence, I realize that this war is far from over. It's only deepening, and the next move will define who I become. I wake to a text at sunrise they've filed. Check your inbox. My chest tightens before I even sit up. I slide out of bed, toes curling against the cool hardwood, and pull my laptop onto the nightstand. There it is, a 42-page PDF stamped in re Alex Hunter v. Hunter & Company. A preliminary injunction motion seeking to freeze my personal and business assets pending irreparable harm to Dad's reputation and risk of defamation. My palms sweat. Jenna warned me they'd hit back hard legally. But seeing it in black and white, my bank accounts, my storefront leases, my company's social media handles, all under threat, hits like a sucker punch. I close the file and pause, breathing in the morning air that smells faintly of stale coffee and city grit. Every step so far has been calculated, every move designed to expose their hypocrisy and protect my growing brand. But this is escalation to another level. A freeze order could collapse Pause and Prosecco overnight, betray hundreds of employees and thousands of loyal customers. The risk I accepted now looms larger than ever. I clamp my jaw and tap out a message to Brian Carter they've filed. What's our counter? I hit send before doubt can paralyze me. Downstairs, the loft is quiet except for the hum of my industrial coffee grinder. I draw a deep line of espresso, straight, no sugar, no milk, because I need the clarity. I rehearse my next moves as the machine roars: mobilize crowdfunding to cover legal fees, secure emergency lines of credit, pivot public messaging to frame this as a billionaire's attempt to silence a small-town founder, and prepare a rallying campaign under the hashtag Freeze the Freeze. Every twitch of anxiety I feel, I channel into determination. I am no longer just Alex Hunter. I am the face of a David vs. Goliath fight with followers who believe in me. By 9 a.m., Pause and Prosecco's flagship is humming with customers. Parked outside, a news crew sets up tripod, glinting in the sun. Jenna meets me at the door, eyes bright despite the sleepless night. They went for the jugular, she says quietly. I nod. Time to bleed them dry with transparency. I slip behind the counter, put on my most assured smile, and address the afternoon crowd. Morning, everyone. We've got big news. Hunter and Company is trying to freeze our accounts, but thanks to your support, we'll keep serving every pup and coffee lover. Today proceeds from every sale go to our legal defense fund, and we've released our financials in full. Check the QR codes on your table to see how we earn and spend every dollar. No secrets. A ripple of applause tempered with exclamations of support. I feel the warmth spread in my chest, the solidarity of a community that's chosen me over the faceless corporation Dad built. I watch as phones come out, people scanning QR codes, sharing screenshots. The news crew's camera pans my way. I hold my posture, shoulders back, voice steady. This is more than business, it's a symbol. Every latte sold, every grooming session booked, becomes a vote for accountability over nepotism, for merit over legacy. After the morning rush, I retreat to the manager's office with Jenna and Marcus on a conference call. Marcus's pitch leaked documents to national outlets frame it as billionaire patriarch abusing the courts to silence a social media star. Jenna prepare an emergency live stream at 5 p.m., invite a legal expert to walk followers through the injunction and countersuit. My mind whirs the live stream could reach millions, but a misstep, oversharing legal misinterpretation could backfire. Still, the risk feels necessary. I lean in, voice firm. Let's do it. Jenna, secure the studio. Marcus, prep reporters. I'll handle the script. Between calls, I steal a moment at the shop's back window. The enamel pin prototype sits on the sill, black claw breaking a silver chain. It catches the light, glinting like a beacon. I pick it up and slip it onto my lapel. It's a simple thing, yet it embodies everything: breaking bonds, refusing to be chained by outdated expectations, forging my own path. Even Dad's legal move can't touch that symbol. I press my palm to the pin drawing strength. At 4 p.m., I'm in our micro studio behind the cafe lights, arranged in a soft rectangle. The camera's red light glows. Jenna cues the timer. I inhale deeply, feel the weight of every follower's gaze, every local news anchor, every judge who might one day see clips of this broadcast. Then I press go live. Hey everyone, Alex Hunter here, live from Pause and Prosecco. This afternoon I got served with an injunction motion that, if successful, would freeze our business accounts and put hundreds of people out of work. I know some of you are angry, some of you are worried, and I get it. But I want to show you exactly what they're trying to hide. Right now, I'm sharing my entire profit and loss statement from the past 12 months. I hold up a QR code to the camera, then another for our legal fund. No shell companies, no offshore accounts, just honest numbers, audited and transparent. This fight isn't just about me. It's about the principle that power shouldn't silence truth. Every share, like purchase of a claw chain pin or cup of coffee, helps us stand up to family privilege weaponized by money. Comments flood in. We stand with you, support small business. They can't win this. My pulse surges as I glance at Jenna off camera. She mouths, "You're doing great." I finish, "Thanks for tuning in. We'll keep you posted, and we've got a special guest, attorney Brian Carter, joining in 10 minutes to answer your questions. And remember, chains are meant to be broken." I reach down and tap the pin, its steel edge warm against my chest. Then I cut the stream. In the lull that follows, happiness and anxiety tangle in my gut. We've raised thousands toward legal fees and hours. But we've also attracted the scrutiny of national media and the full wrath of Hunter and Company's high-powered attorneys. I pack up my gear, peeling off the pin and turning it over in my hand. Symbols can rally the masses, but in court, they're meaningless. The real battle will be on paper in sworn depositions under oath. That evening, I head to Brian's office for a closed-door strategy meeting. He greets me with a sober nod. "You've built a media fortress," he says quietly. "Now we need to secure the legal flank. We file countermotions tomorrow: breach of contract, promissory estoppel, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We'll also request a jury trial to force a public airing of all documents." I swallow. A jury trial risks exposure of every gritty detail: my startup debts, my investors, even my past mistakes. But Brian's right: in public, their veneer cracks. I nod. Let's do it. Walking home under the amber street lamps, I pass a row of brownstones, each one a fortress, each one hiding stories of loyalty and betrayal. I think of Mom, who once told me blood is thicker than water, and then left me stranded when Dad snapped his fingers. I feel the ache of that lesson twisting in my chest. I wonder if she's reading about me now, torn between maternal pride and filial duty. The night air is crisp, carrying the distant hum of the F train. I raise my collar against a breeze that feels like possibility and foreboding blended. Back in my loft, I sit at the desk and open my journal. I pen a single phrase, courage is contagious. I look at the claw chain pin beside the ink and realize that symbols can outlive us. They become talismans for movements, anecdotes, for speeches, artifacts in a museum of struggle. But what truly matters is the story of the choices we make when the chains tighten. Tomorrow, the courtroom will decide if my fight is valid, but tonight I choose to believe that justice favors the bold. And as I set the journal aside and switch off the lamp, my phone buzzes again, a DM from an unknown lawyer offering to settle, no terms disclosed. My thumb hovers over the message. The night stretches before me like a tightrope, one misstep and I topple. One step forward and I soar. I close my eyes, feeling that familiar thrum of risk and resolve. The next move will shape everything, and somewhere in the dark, the claw and chain await their fate. The morning the settlement offer arrived, I woke with a weight in my chest so heavy I thought my ribs might crack. My phone buzzed on the nightstand just before sunrise, and I saw an email from a big law partner at Oldbridge and Kane, confidential proposed settlement terms attached. My heart leaped because in this war of David versus Goliath, even a Goliath sometimes throws a bone. But as I dragged myself out of bed, the first thing I did was grip the claw and chain pin on my lapel like a talisman thumb brushing its jagged edge. Last week, it had been a symbol of defiance. Now it felt like a reminder that every fight carries a bust. I powered up my laptop, logged into our encrypted folder, and opened the PDF they were offering to drop the injunction and dismiss their defamation claim. If I agreed to a non-disclosure clause, issued a public apology to the Hunter family legacy. And here it was, the kicker transfer, 25% of Paws and Prosecco's Brooklyn holdings into a new family trust with Dad and Mason as co-trustees. My jaw dropped. They wanted half my empire in exchange for silence. I sat at the edge of my bed, heart hammering. Jenna's voice in my head echoed, "Never take the first deal?" But the offer glamored me with its promise of peace. My mind raced through worst-case scenarios. If I refuse, the injunction stays, my account's frozen, payroll checks bounce, employees lose jobs, the community turns on me. If I sign, I save the business but hand control back to the same dynasty that nearly suffocated me years ago. Is compromise ever possible with those who see you as unworthy? I closed my eyes and pictured the little dog from yesterday's grooming station, his eyes full of trust, and the single mother who'd left her baby in my cafe while she ran errands, gratitude in her tired smile. Their livelihoods depended on Paws and Prosecco staying open. The pin in my hand felt cold, but its symbolism burned inside me. Breaking chains wasn't easy, but it was necessary for freedom. Over the next hour, I paced my loft, streaming the sunrise through my window, playlists of empowering anthems looping in my earbuds. I scribbled pros and cons in my journal. Pros: immediate lifting of legal cloud access to quarterly dividends, quiet end to public drama. Cons: insult of forced loyalty, precedent that family can strong-arm me, dilution of my control. A personal betrayal as toxic as any defamation. I tapped out a text to Brian Carter. "They want to settle, let's talk." Then another to Jenna. "We need to convene now." I watched my messages send and felt the familiar flicker of anxiety. No one likes to admit they need a lifeline, but even David once reconsidered before facing the giant. An hour later, I met Jenna and Brian at our downtown co-working space, a sleek glass box that contrasted sharply with the corporate tower across the street that still bore the Hunter and Combry moniker in steel letters. Jenna's eyes were sharp as she reviewed the settlement terms, her pencil tapping the margin. Brian leaned back, fingers steepled. "They're desperate," he said. "The injunction has stalled transactions, investors are jittery, and local press is turning nasty. They need a face-saving exit." I stared at him. "So, if I bluff, they'll fold?" He shrugged. "Possibly. But you need leverage." I stared at the claw and chain pin in my jacket pocket. That simple icon had galvanized a community, sparked an online movement, and forced a family dynasty to their knees. "But leverage needs evidence. What else have we got?" I asked. Brian laid out the plan file. "Our counterclaims tomorrow: fraudulent concealment of family trust assets, promissory estoppel for Dads, written promises, unjust enrichment for Mason's clandestine real estate deals, and simultaneously prepare a last and final settlement response: a refusal. Unless they restore my full ownership, rescind all past corporate resolutions that disenfranchise me, and issue a public letter acknowledging the value of Paws and Prosecco and my rightful leadership. Then leak that refusal with our supporting docs to every major outlet." "Pressure point," Brian said. We show the public they're not generous, they're extorting you. Jenna added, we build a digital scaffolding. A countdown clock on the website. Family trust deadline 48 hours. A live stream town hall to rally supporters. Crowdfund a billboard in Times Square reading no chains on pause and Prosecco. Then watch them crumble. The audacity of it made my pulse race. But I felt a spark courage or maybe madness flicker to life. I nodded. Do it. That evening, I returned to the flagship store to announce our decision. The cafe was buzzing families sipping paw-themed lattes, rescue groups browsing flyers, staff topping off dog water bowls. I grabbed a mic during a lull, the DJ softening the lounge hall music. I held the pin up for everyone to see its broken chain catching the soft glow of Edison bulbs, friends. I began, voice steady, eyes sweeping the room. They came to me with an offer, hand over a quarter of this business, bow to their legacy, and walk away in peace. But chains aren't meant to be reattached. We stand for freedom, integrity, and community. We refuse. The room erupted in applause, cheers, even tears. I felt my chest swell. This wasn't just my fight, it was ours. Yet as I basked in their support, I noticed a man in a crisp navy suit lingering near the door. His arms crossed, expression inscrutable. He gave a curt nod and slipped out. I frowned. Security hadn't flagged him. Who was he? A spy for Dad, a journalist. I pushed the thought aside. The momentum was too electric to dampen now. Later that night in the quiet of my loft, I mapped out the trajectory. Brian would file tomorrow. Jenna would launch the countdown clock. I'd host the live stream. I laid the claw and chain pin on my desk next to my laptop and framed it in my mind as the spearhead of a new era for pause and Prosecco. Symbols are powerful. This pin could become a rallying cry for anyone shackled by outdated expectations, for every entrepreneur told they don't belong. But with every escalation, the stakes climbed higher. Mason had resources Dad couldn't imagine. They could dig up dirt on my past, twist my words, even target my personal life. I felt the first flicker of dread. What if they retaliated by exploiting my vulnerabilities, spreading rumors about my personal relationships, my health, even my mental fitness as a CEO? The notion squeezed my chest, vulnerability as a two-edged sword. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Brooklyn Borough President requests investigation into Hunter and Company finances. I stared at it, breath-catching. Our leak had already triggered political ripples. City Hall was watching. That was the moment I realized this was never just a family feud or a small business fight. It was a seismic reckoning in a world where privilege often blinds us to merit, where legacies can imprison rather than inspire. The pin on my desk glinted under lamplight, a reminder that symbols can outlast us, but only if we live up to them. I brushed my fingers against its edge, tasting the tension of possibility and peril. As midnight edged closer, I logged onto the private support forum I'd set up for employees and backers. Messages flooded in, offers of legal fund donations, stories of personal resilience, even artwork sketches of the claw and chain motif. Tears pricked my eyes as I read one note from a single mother who said pause and Prosecco had saved her dog's life and given her purpose. That's why I fight. I reminded myself, not for revenge, but for the lives we touch, the communities we build, the futures we protect. I drafted a reply thanking her and promising that pause and Prosecco would stand firm, no chains, no compromises. Then my phone buzzed again, this time with a simple text from an unknown number, deadline 24 hours. Offer stands, no signature, no flourish, a challenge thrown in the dark. My thumb hovered over the screen, and for a moment I thought about accepting. But I remembered the look on the single mother's face, the dogs waiting in my store windows, the employees depending on their paychecks. I pictured that broken chain rising like a phoenix from its ashes. And I typed back 2 words, not happening. The message sent. The clock started ticking. The next 24 hours would decide everything, my business, my dignity, my future. And as I stared at the claw and chain pin catching the moonlight through my window, I realized that the hardest step isn't breaking free, it's staying free. The night stretched before me silent, except for my own ragged breath. And in that hush, I braced for the storm. The morning the settlement terms landed in my inbox, I stared at the subject line, Hunter and Company. Proposed settlement, and felt a chill that wasn't from the early spring air slipping in through my cracked loft window. I'd been braced for something, anything, but seeing those words made my heart thud like a hammer against my ribs. I poured strong coffee, black no sugar, into my favorite chipped mug, the one with the faded pause and Prosecco logo, and sat at my desk, surrounded by scattered notes and half-drunk lattes from the week before. My cursor hovered over the attachment. I breathed in, tasted bitter determination, and clicked. 42 pages of legalese unfolded, they would lift the injunction and drop the defamation suit. If I signed a 2-year non-disparagement clause, issued a public apology to the Hunter family legacy, and handed over 25% of Paws and Prosecco's Brooklyn equity into a Hunter family trust. My stomach twisted. They wanted to reward their own hypocrisy with half of my blood sweat and years of hard grind. I closed my eyes and pictured the enamel pin, the tiny cat's claw snapping the chain, and felt its cool weight in my jacket pocket. That pin, once a symbol of defiance, now felt like a crossroads: take the deal, save my business, betray my cause, or refuse, risking everything to stand on principle. I texted Brian Carter. We need to discuss settlement immediately. Seconds later, my phone pinged on it. Meet at 2. Next, I messaged Jenna Lopez settlement offer. Convene war room at 2. As I sent the messages, my chest tightened, not fear exactly, more like the electric thrill before a storm breaks. I locked the attachment away, grabbed my blazer, and headed out. The streets of Brooklyn were waking up, baristas calling out names, delivery trucks rattling, dogs tugging leashes on their owners. Every life moving forward, oblivious to the drama about to erupt. At Paws and Prosecco's boardroom, a reclaimed loft space with exposed brick, I found Jenna and Brian already deep in strategy. Jenna's brows were furrowed as she highlighted key clauses. Brian riffled through page after page, calculating legal counterpunches. They're desperate, Brian said, voice low. This is a power move. They want to suck you back into the family orbit so they can silence you for good. That 25% equity, it's a trap. Jenna slammed the marker down. They assume everyone has a breaking point. Well, I don't think Alex has one. I drew in a breath, feeling the gravity of their words. What's our exit strategy? I asked. Brian glanced at me with that calm, unwavering gaze. We refuse, he said simply. Counter with full claims, breach of contract, promissory estoppel, unjust enrichment. Then we leak their offer to the press with our refusal letter attached. Frame it as corporate extortion against a small business. Jenna added, and we launched the No Chains campaign, billboards, merch, livestream, town hall. We'll turn their leverage into a downfall. Leaving the loft, I felt the weight of that decision settle in my bones. Refuse the deal, risk having every account frozen again, possibly even a contempt motion. But accept, and I'd be handing over both my business and my dignity. I walked the few blocks to my flagship store, the one that started as a pop-up in a damp parking lot. I unlocked the door, and as I entered, the familiar scent of almond shampoo and fresh pastries greeted me, comforting, grounding. A framed photo of the enamel pin prototype hung above the community board, surrounded by hand-drawn fan art and sticky notes. Someone had added a new sketch overnight, a raised fist with dog fur trailing from it. I smiled, heart swelling. This was bigger than me now. I cleared my throat to get everyone's attention. The grooming stations quieted, baristas paused mid-pour, and Jenna joined me at the front. I held up the chipped mug, tracing the faded logo with my thumb. Friends, I began, voice steady, eyes sweeping the room. We got an offer from Hunter & Company to hand over part of our soul in exchange for silence. But chains aren't meant to snap back into place. Today, we refuse. A swell of applause broke out, staff cheering, customers clapping. I felt a surge of warmth and fear, pride for standing firm, worry for what came next. Jenna stepped forward, pulling a stack of stickers printed with a broken chain icon. These go on every cup today, she said. Show the world we choose freedom. By afternoon, local news crews had caught wind of our refusal. A camera crew set up across the street, filming the broken chain stickers plastered on our windows. I slipped outside, the crisp air filling my lungs, and faced the lens. The reporter asked, "Aren't you afraid of the legal fallout?" I looked at the enamel pin on my lapel, its jagged edge glinting. I am, I said honestly, but I'm more afraid of a world where small businesses get bulldozed by family dynasties. This isn't just my fight, it's everyone who's ever been told that they don't deserve a seat at the table. Inside the store, orders soared as the community rallied behind us. Every latte purchase came with a broken chain sticker. Proceeds from pin sales were siphoned into the legal fund. Our hashtag no chains trended locally. Yet as I watched transactions ring up, I noticed Mason's name pop up in a text alert from a gossip site. Break. Alex Hunter refuses family settlement. Hunter & Company insiders say he's risking it all. My chest tightened with both triumph and dread. They were mobilizing their narrative, painting me as reckless, ungrateful, a spoiled child rebelling against rightful authority. I sipped my coffee, tasting resolve and bitterness in equal measure. That evening, I convened a live stream town hall in our micro studio behind the cafe. Jenna moderated as community members phoned in single parents, rescue volunteers, former employees of Hunter and Company who'd faced their own silencing. I listened to stories of betrayal and perseverance of small victories against entrenched power. Each tale fortified me, turned my fear into fuel. When it was my turn, I held up the chipped mug, the same one I'd used that morning, and said, "This mug has seen my doubts, my defeats, and my victories. It reminds me that even when things are cracked, they still hold up coffee and hope. We're cracked sometimes, but not broken." The chat exploded with hearts and claps, but at the edge of my screen, a new notification blinked. Hunter and Kobadi has filed a motion for sanctions. The words hit like ice water. Even as cheers echoed in my ears, I felt a cold knot of anticipation. The real battle was just beginning. I closed my laptop and leaned back, the studio lights humming above. Symbols, pins, mugs had rallied our tribe, but in court, only evidence mattered. I thought of Sophia's envelope of emails, Brian's filings, Jenna's campaign strategy. I thought of every dog we'd groomed, every latte we'd poured with love. This wasn't just about business or family pride. It was about whether people like me could stand up to legacies built on privilege. The courthouse steps loomed ahead, a gauntlet I'd volunteered to run. And as I stared at the muted screen, I realized that the hardest test wasn't refusing the deal, it was surviving the war that followed. In the dawn's afterglow, I took a slow breath, feeling both dread and exhilaration. The next chapter would be judged not by clicks or cheers, but by the gavel's fall, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. I stood on the courthouse steps before sunrise, the air crisp and heavy with anticipation, as though the city itself was holding its breath. My breath came in steady puffs, each exhale visible in the pale light. In my hand, I clutched the enamel pin, the broken claw, and snapped chain like a talisman against doubt. Today was the final hearing for the counter-motions breach of contract, promissory estoppel, unjust enrichment, and fraud in the inducement. Jenna had whispered the night before, "Win or lose, you'll change the conversation about family and business forever." I wasn't sure which outcome I feared more, the bitter taste of defeat or the hollow triumph of victory over flesh and blood, but I had come too far to flinch. Inside the marble-clad courtroom, I found Brian Carter waiting by the defense table, adjusting his tie with calm precision. Across the aisle sat Mason, cool suit, practiced smirk, and Dad, whose normally commanding presence seemed diminished under the weight of public scrutiny. The judge entered, and the room stilled. The clerk called the case, and the judge began with a soft admonition to keep proceedings civil. I looked back toward the gallery rows of reporters, friends from Pause and Prosecco, local activists who had championed Hat No Chains, and even Sophia, her face a pale reflection of relief and worry. Their eyes met mine, and I felt a surge of responsibility to every person who had put their faith in me. The hearing opened with Mason's counsel delivering their shrill counter-argument that the defamation was unfounded, that the settlement refusal was reckless, and that my public campaign constituted malicious interference. The language dripped with corporate polish, but I recognized it as the same tactic Dad had used at Easter dinner remove. Emotion, weaponized logic, silence, dissent. When it was my turn, I rose, buttoned my blazer, and walked to the podium. My heart hammered, but I steadied myself on the lectern and began in a clear, measured voice. "Your Honor, this case is not about corporate posturing. It's about a family legacy that demanded absolute loyalty and then used the courts to enforce it." I opened the briefcase beside me, pulled out 3 documents: Sophia's envelope, my scholarship letter annotated in Dad's handwriting, and the family trust proposal, and laid them on the podium. Each page felt heavier than the last. I told the judge about that Easter announcement, of how the room's applause had cut me deeper than any insult. I recounted Dad's phone calls, the hollow promises, followed by icy silence. Then I displayed the offshore documents, the shell companies, and Mason's role in diverting trust assets. I spoke not with anger, but with a quiet conviction. I honored every implied promise. I invested not only capital, but my very integrity into this business. And when I asked only for the paperwork that formalized my stake, I was met with terms that would have stripped me of everything I built. This is not family, it is coercion. I felt the judge's gaze lock on me, and I sensed the courtroom leaning in. After I presented Brian Rose to walk through the legal standards breach of contract, promissory estoppel, how Dad's written promises had created a legal obligation and unjust enrichment, how Hunter and Company profited from my investments without honoring their commitments. He concluded with an appeal to fairness, reminding the judge that equity favored those who acted in reliance on a promise. I watched as Mason's counsel flinched a momentary crack in their facade. Then the gallery erupted softly murmurs of recognition that this was bigger than two brothers fighting. This was a test of whether personal bonds or the rule of law would prevail. When the judge recessed for a private conference, the tension in the hall was palpable. Jenna and I held hands under the bench. "Win or lose," she whispered, "you've already rewritten the rules for families and businesses." I nodded, but my chest ached. I had opened wounds I wasn't sure could heal. Outside, the scent of early spring blossoms drifted through the open window, a reminder that renewal often followed upheaval. 2 hours later, the judge returned and beckoned us forward. The room fell silent as he cleared his throat. After careful review of the evidence and arguments, he began, "I find for the plaintiff, Mr. Alexander Hunter, on counts of breach of contract and promissory estoppel. The defendant is ordered to restore full equitable interest in Paws and Prosecco's Brooklyn operations to Mr. Hunter and pay damages in the amount of $300,000 for unjust enrichment and legal costs." A ripple of stunned relief washed over me. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them to meet Jenna's shining gaze. Mason's face drained of color, and Dad's jaw clenched as he slumped in his seat. The victory was a tide that swept through the room, raising me on a wave of vindication. As I gathered my things, reporters bombarded me with questions. "Will you reconcile with your father? What's next for Paws and Prosecco?" Any regrets, I answered with the same sincerity that had carried me this far. I fought, not out of spite, but for respect for myself and for anyone who's ever been told they didn't deserve a seat at the table. I refrained from saying that forgiveness might come someday, but only when trust was earned again. Instead, I turned to Sophia and hugged her, feeling the fragile promise of familial bonds being slowly repaired in that embrace. Outside the courthouse, the city buzzed with the news. Social media exploded, "Had justice for Alex, had no chains, had Paws prevail." Crowds gathered, customers from my stores, passers-by who'd read Marcus's expose, families who'd supported our campaign. They cheered as I stepped onto the courthouse steps, raising the pin-clad lapel of my jacket like a banner. Cameras flashed. My voice trembled with emotion as I spoke into every microphone. Today isn't just my victory. It's a victory for every small business, every individual who's ever been marginalized by legacy or tradition. We've shown that integrity and hard work can triumph over arbitrary privilege. The weekends that followed felt surreal. At Paws and Prosecco's flagship, I reopened the doors with a Freedom Day celebration. We served free coffees, gave away the broken claw pins, and welcomed families who'd come to honor the fight. A little girl, clutching her rescued terrier, looked up at me and said, "You're like a superhero." I knelt to her level and ruffled her hair. We're all superheroes when we stand for what's right. That moment crystallized for me the power of purpose over profit, solidarity over solitude. Yet even in victory, I felt the undercurrents of tension. Dad's empire trembled, and I knew he would rebuild. Mason, chastened but not defeated, might seek other means to regain control. And the court's decision, while momentous, did not erase years of betrayal. The enamel pin, once a simple merch idea, had become a symbol of defiance and community resilience, a beacon that now rested on my desk, glinting under the evening lamp. It reminded me that symbols endure, but they require stewards who honor their meaning. As spring deepened into summer, Paws and Prosecco expanded to a fourth location in Queens, funded by a community-backed investment round, a testament that crowdsourced belief could rival inherited wealth. We launched scholarships for aspiring entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds, fulfilling the spirit of my own journey from that Brooklyn pop-up to courtroom triumph. Each scholarship recipient received a set of broken claw pins, a nod to the struggles that shape us and the bonds we choose to break or to keep. One morning, I received a note slipped under my door: "Meet me at the Riverside Loft at 6 p.m. R." My heart stuttered. It was an olive branch from Dad. I stared at the handwriting, familiar, formal. He wanted to meet on neutral ground, the scene of our original split. I felt the old wound ache, but also a flicker of hope that the chains between us could be reimagined rather than reforged. I considered refusing, remembered the text from Mason's ghost lawyer, "Don't let him in." But I also recalled Sophia's counsel, "Not everyone is our enemy." So I pocketed the pin, slipped into a simple shirt, and walked the riverside path toward the loft. The sun dipped low, painting the water gold. As I neared the entrance, I paused, the broken chain of the pin pressing against my heart, balancing justice and the possibility of reconciliation. The door creaked open before I could knock. Dad stood there, older, wearier, but with a glint of something earnest in his eyes. He gestured inside. I stepped across the threshold, the ghosts of Easter past whispering through the drafty hallway. I did not know what awaited me inside apology accusation or another trap. But I had come prepared with the strength forged in courts and cafes, the solidarity of a community behind me, and the symbol of a broken chain that reminded me freedom was worth any risk. As the door closed behind me, sealing us in that half-lit room, I realized this was another trial, one of the soul of forgiveness, and of whether family bonds could be reconstructed on the labor of truth rather than the weight of inheritance. And in that charged quiet, I wondered, was this the beginning of a new chapter, or the final twist in a story that refused to settle? The answer hovered between us unspoken as the last rays of sun fell across the broken claw pin on my lapel, a promise that the next move was ours to define. I'm Marcus 35, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family's emergency contact insurance policy and ATM. I fixed broken furnaces, footed surprise medical bills, and even covered my sister Clara's rent when she couldn't keep a major or a job. In return, I got polite nods and the occasional thanks until last Sunday when everything changed. Growing up, I was the dependable older brother, methodical, cautious forever, the calm voice in our Minnesota home. Clara, 5 years younger, was the wild card. By 12, she'd figured out that a dramatic hissy fit could bend mom and dad to her will. When she borrowed my bike, crashed it, and then bawled for a replacement, my parents quietly paid to replace it while I was told to share more kindly. After college, I landed a steady engineering role in Chicago. I skipped lavish vacations and fancy cars, instead funneling my spare cash back home to help with mortgages and emergencies. Dad's chemotherapy copay when his job-based insurance lapsed mom's overdue property taxes when she missed paperwork deadlines, and Clara's tuition when she flunked out halfway through her second major. I thought love was doing things, sweeping up their crises before I had a chance to make any of my own. That Sunday lunch felt like any other family obligation, except Clara had a new wrinkle. She'd bought a TV rental business subscription for herself, something she absolutely needed and forgot to let me know. When the bill bounced, she begged me to fix it. I paid it without complaint, as always. Halfway through ham and mashed potatoes with the scent of rosemary in the air, she glanced at me, smirked, and tossed off a phrase she'd learned from friends online. "You're just salty because nobody actually needs you anymore." Then she laughed. Mom tittered. Dad rolled his eyes at me like I was an overeager intern still trying to prove my worth. I felt the air go thin. No one spoke up for me. In that moment, I stopped being invisible. Without breaking eye contact, I quietly said, "All right." I slipped my phone from my pocket, opened our shared family autopay folder, and hovered over their utilities account. I didn't shout. I didn't throw the gravy boat. My hands only trembled a little. Clara scowled. "You wouldn't dare." Mom's wine glass paused midair. Dad set down his fork. "Try me," I said softly as I tapped cancel. One by one, I removed my payment methods. Electric, gas, internet, water. Then I deleted the card tied to Clara's rent account. She lived in my name, I was told, because her credit needed help. I gave them 30 days before service cutoff and eviction notices, just enough time to scramble for payments, but not enough to ignore me any longer. Then I stood, gathered my jacket, and walked out. My pulse raced with something entirely new: freedom. Outside in the crisp afternoon, I felt light, as though 10 years of obligations had turned into nothing more than a thick coat I'd finally shrugged off. I didn't look back. Predictably, the calls started within the hour. Clara's frantic texts, Mom's clipped voicemails, Dad's proud but wounded sigh over the voicemail greeting. I didn't answer. My phone buzzed again. "You're bluffing." It was Clara. She still thought I was too soft to see this through. I slipped my phone into my pocket and walked the 3 blocks to my apartment, breathing deeper than I had in years. I spent the next hour systematically logging into every account I'd set up for them. Mortgage, autopay, insurance, premiums, Netflix, Spotify, even the streaming service Clara used to binge true crime documentaries. All gone. I left them with one final message in our family group chat: "Rent and bills are on you now. Enjoy." Then I closed my laptop. That night, my phone erupted. Missed calls 20 by midnight and a flurry of panicked texts. "Clara, this is insane. Please fix it. Mom, Marcus, we need you. Dad, call me." I ignored them all. Instead, I poured a glass of whiskey, the first I'd had in years, and gazed out my window at the city lights. On day 3, Clara showed up at my door. She wore yesterday's clothes, her hair a tangled mess. No makeup to hide the worry in her eyes. I opened the door just enough to see her in the hallway. "Can we talk?" she whispered. I leaned back into the frame. "What changed?" she asked. "Why do you hate us?" I shook my head. I don't hate you. I just stopped doing all the work so you'd notice I existed. Her shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, she said, voice cracking. But it wasn't enough. I need a proof you care before I'll beg again. She exhaled, tension leaving her body. I studied her, saw that the tough act had cracked. But I wasn't ready to rebuild the old way. I gave you 30 days, I said. Pay what you owe and ask. Nicely. She blinked, tears threatening. Okay. Then she vanished down the hallway. That evening, Dad called properly, no voicemail, just one missed call. Late, but something in his gentle, broken tone said he finally saw me not as the fixer, but as a person. He left a text, let's talk? I get it now. I stared at it, uncertain whether to trust what felt like a peace offering or a sly trap. But I knew something had shifted. In the quiet that followed, I realized that real love doesn't live in autopay or unspoken sacrifices. It's in honest conversations, clear boundaries, and the space you allow others and yourself to breathe. The moment I stopped being everybody's crutch, I discovered I'd been weighing myself down all along. That night, I drank my whiskey neat, savoring its bite. And I smiled because for the first time I'd paid the price, not just for their bills, but for my own freedom.